So hi everyone, and welcome to this Epigm Q&A. I'm joined today by Dr. James Abdey. James is Associate Professorial Lecturer in Statistics at the London School of Economics and Political Science. James is also the lead advisor for our new interactive online programme, Statistical Research Methods. James, thank you for joining us today. It's fantastic to have you with us as we develop the new course and kind of discussing some of the approaches of the programme and also more broadly some of those areas around developing statistical literacy and working effectively with statistics for early stage researchers. Well, if we can dive in with the first question for you, statistical anxiety is a term that we often hear used in relation to quantitative methods. Could you outline for us briefly what is statistics anxiety? And in your experience, how does this impact on the skills development of early stage researchers?
Well, indeed. Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be involved with this project. So, well, in terms of my background, I've been teaching statistics for many years now, and I've clearly recognized that not everyone is a fan of data. And I think this term sort of statistical anxiety, I just think of it as a lot of people feel they lack the sort of self confidence, the sort of self-belief, in particular, to analyze data independently. Now, I'm biased, but I always think statistical analysis is actually quite straightforward, provided it is taught well, and students are clearly navigated about what the different kinds of tests are, when to use, for example, a t-test versus a regression, for example. So there is a lot of statistical anxiety out there, and especially among researchers, especially those more in the qualitative disciplines who increasingly recognize the importance of getting hold of good data to try and provide empirical evidence to back up, support, or indeed refute particular theories, claims, hypotheses about the world. So I know there are many, especially more qualitative discipline researchers who wish to improve their capacity to conduct data analysis independently. And so with this online course, we're hoping that those who successfully complete it, by the end of it, a key outcome should be that sort of self-belief to be able to take their data, interrogate the data in a correct way, and assist with the overall quality and impact of their research.
Fantastic. Yeah, and it's absolutely that kind of confidence building, as you say. So you've touched on this already, but how can online learning particularly build and extend researchers' confidence? And how do you envisage the new course supporting researchers and institutions as well?
Well, I think the great thing about an online space or medium for learning is that learners can take things at their own pace, and especially with quantitative work, some people take a little bit longer than others in order to fully grasp a concept. And I'm a great believer in sort of repetition, and I feel practice very much does make perfect with regards to quantitative techniques. So when you have online resources, screencasts, and these sort of explanations of particular models, then at a learner's own pace, they can study it as many times as necessary until they feel they have the aptitude to apply it to their own data sets. And I often think learning about statistical analysis, it's a bit like learning a language, in that to become proficient in a language, I'm going to oversimplify here, but I always think of it, you need to know sort of your vocabulary and your grammar, you need to know the words, and you need to know the correct grammar rules for putting those words together. Then with repeated practice, over time, the fluency comes. Now, of course, some people are quite natural linguists, and they can perhaps pick up a new language quite quickly. For others, it's a bit of a longer slog. And I think it is very much analogous to sort of statistical analysis. One really needs the equivalent of the sort of vocabulary and the grammar, specifically the different kinds of statistical tests and models, how to actually execute them, using whichever software platform one is using, and of course how to interpret those results. So with repeated practice, and this is where people will vary dramatically in terms of their pace of learning, then having an online medium of instruction does allow learners to take things at their own pace, a sort of more personalized learning experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really important, and being able to kind of save some of the material as you go as well, and as you say, that personalized route through the content. So we've touched on this already, but statistical literacy is an essential tool in the researcher toolkit for effectively communicating research. So how can being able to work effectively with statistics and data support storytelling and narrative communication and enhance the impact of research projects?
Yes, I love this phrase storytelling. It's become quite fashionable, particularly with the rise of sort of data visualization, and it's about telling a story. However, critically, with data, we're talking about stories of fact rather than stories of fiction. And indeed, I mean, the impact of storytelling. Anyone can come up with a theory or claim about anything, but just because someone claims something doesn't itself make it true. And so the great beauty of statistical analysis, data analysis, is to actually provide more objective evidence, literally data evidence, to back up or refute theories, claims about how the world is. So I think it is essential for any researcher, regardless of their discipline, to have a good, solid grasp and foundation in statistical analysis, such that either claims they themselves wish to make and need to back them up with evidence, or perhaps they're trying to critique the status quo and current thinking about how the world works. Maybe we need to let the data speak, and perhaps the data are actually going against what some established theories or claims or hypotheses of the world are. So I think it's a great, although it's statistics as a discipline, it's very much lends itself to an interdisciplinary environment, such that regardless of one's home discipline, there is scope to employ statistical analysis to, again, provide this evidence, to provide a compelling story, but a story based on fact rather than fiction, to support their particular research claims.
And you will be planning to author our reproducibility modules in the course. So they're evidence-based statistical inference and false positives, false negatives, the need for reproducibility of results. I know that you're a strong advocate for reproducibility. Could you speak around your experiences in this area and some of the issues and debates in the field as well?
Absolutely. Well, this is very much my sort of bread and butter. So when I did my PhD X years ago, I won't give the numerical value of X, but it was all on p-values. And so I called my thesis "To P or Not to P," because I know there is still currently an ongoing debate in, shall we say, the literature about the appropriateness of p-values. And indeed, there's been examples of some journals effectively banning the use of p-values. Now, my view is there's nothing wrong with p-values. The problem is people don't fully understand what they are. And this is usually due to, perhaps, shall we say, poor instruction, or just a lack of understanding or miscommunication about what p-values do tell us versus what they do not tell us. They do not give cast iron guarantees. If you have a statistically significant result, doesn't mean that is a discovery. A significant result is a positive result, but any positive is either going to be a true positive or a false positive, just as any insignificant result, it's a negative result, and it's either a true negative or a false negative. And especially in my teaching, I often try to link this to the various COVID tests. So I'm sure everyone listening has taken many COVID tests over the years, for which it's not a statistical test, but nonetheless, it is a test. And if we ignore the inconclusive results, your test, whether it's PCR, rapid antigen, or anything else, is going to return either a positive or negative result. But a positive result does not mean an individual has COVID. It means the test thinks the individual has COVID. And none of these tests are perfect. Just as a negative result does not mean the person is sort of a virus-free. It could be that they are asymptomatic and the test failed to detect it. So especially in these sort of medical diagnostic tests, the issues of sensitivity and specificity, and this lends themselves very nicely to these ideas of false positives, false negatives, which I'm very passionate about and feel this needs to be fully explored in the appropriate online module for this course, such that whenever people are doing statistical testing, they have a sense that this is not cast iron truth. A type 1 error, type 2 error, false positive, false negative, respectively, could always occur. And hence an emphasis on the need for reproducibility of results. If you've made a genuine discovery, if it is a true positive rather than just a positive, which could be a false positive, then you should be able to replicate those results again and again and again with new data sets when one is testing and retesting. Likewise, insignificant results. I'm sure there are countless examples in human history, we just don't know what they are, of these sort of missed discoveries. People got a large p-value and they thought there's nothing here, and that could have been simply a false negative, and perhaps there was no further exploration of that route, and there's probably countless of missed discoveries to date. So yeah, a strong emphasis on reproducibility, but also distinguishing between statistical significance and practical significance, because some people, I think, or many people, are trained to just look at this p-value and this is almost sort of truth about the world. Well, it is not, but also what things or what factors affect the magnitude of a p-value. So looking at things like the effect size, the influence of sample size, and especially a key danger, I think, in a world of big data. There's various definitions of what big data is, but if we focus purely on, shall we say, the quantity of data, if your sample size is large enough, almost everything becomes statistically significant, but in such cases, very often the result is of zero practical significance. So it's about sort of deep diving into these areas. So it's not just your sort of bog standard hypothesis testing module, but having a deeper appreciation of false positives, false negatives, statistical power of tests, such that people are clear in their minds about what a specific p-value is telling us, and so that there's no sort of misleading conclusions are drawn due to an incorrect understanding and appreciation of what p-values truly are.
Fantastic. And how does equipping researchers to responsibly use statistics and data in this way not only enhance reproducibility, but also the integrity of research? And we also have some companion modules within the program, so it'd be great to kind of speak around that a little further.
Yes, data integrity. Can you trust your data? And I teach in sort of various applied areas of statistics, and of course not all data is necessarily reliable, especially in, shall we say, maybe the social sciences. If you are canvassing people, surveying them for their opinions, attitudes, tastes, preferences, goodness knows how much sort of response biases are included, non-response biases as well. So just because one has data, one does not necessarily is able to trust it. In contrast, if in perhaps a business setting, if you're looking at, I don't know, transactions of a supermarket or some e-commerce giant, I'll name no names, but typically those transactions, that's sort of a more objective fact. So yeah, some delving into issues of data integrity, reliability, validity. Just because you have data does not necessarily mean it is good data. So otherwise you have this sort of garbage in, garbage out kind of approach to analysis. So yeah, making learners aware of these issues. Clearly, when learners work on their own data sets in their own respective fields, it will be up to them to make these judgment calls on reliability, validity, etc. But we can at least give them the tools to know what they are looking for and how to approach this.
And we've touched on this a little bit already, but so research is increasingly interdisciplinary, and the new programme will be designed so that we have subject pathways and we have options and discipline menus, but it will also cut across disciplines. How can statistics learning contribute to enhancing interdisciplinary skills in a practical way?
Well, I mean, I like to think the methods and techniques that learners would follow in the course. I mean, they are clearly widely applicable. Inevitably, by way of examples, we will need to give some specific data sets in particular fields, and clearly it's not feasible to cater to every possible discipline that learners are likely to be dabbling in. However, if we can offer fairly sort of relatable examples, such that it doesn't really matter what the variables you have data on are. If we had, for example, climate data by way of example, that's something people can readily relate to. And then if you understand how these methods work, then it's simply a matter of sort of you're substituting examples that we provide with a learner's own data set in their own respective field. Of course, the methods are the same, how one interrogates the data remain the same, but of course the learner will have more domain-specific knowledge and understanding of their respective areas. So it's really about you giving people the tools, the methods to employ this, and frankly, the actual subject area examples which are provided, I mean, they're purely really for illustrative purposes. But by having something or examples which are readily or easy for many people to relate to, then they can sort of branch off and apply these same techniques in their own respective fields.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, the kind of cross-cutting areas, like climate change is a really great example. So a key consideration also for quantitative methods is software. Could you summarize some of the areas we're considering around this in the course development and the potential approach to software packages within the program?
Yeah, software is always a good one. It's a bit of a minefield. I mean, inevitably, people have their sort of personal preferences for one software platform over another. I mean, my view is that the software is just a tool in order to effectively do the number crunching, and with a given data set, whether you're shoving, if you're running a regression, say, whether you're shoving it into even simply Excel or SPSS or Stata or R or Python or JASP is another more recent one I've been made aware of, you're going to get exactly the same results out. Clearly, some software may be easier to navigate, may seem more intuitive than others. How e.g. regression results are presented, there may be slight cosmetic differences, but it doesn't really matter. And then my analogy would be take a phone. What handset do you have? Doesn't really matter. You'll have a preference perhaps for a specific a brand, but in terms of being able to phone someone or message someone, take a photo, it really makes no practical difference. Or computers, is one a Windows or a sort of a Mac lover? It doesn't really matter. One can still perform the same sorts of tasks. So this is, of course, open up for debate. I'm sure prospective module authors will have their own personal preferences in their teaching and their comfort and familiarity. So to what extent there is variation in preferred software packages across sort of module authors, again, up for discussion. To what extent maybe to offer, let's say, sort of screencast or worked examples of the same data set, but possibly across a range of different software packages, and then learners themselves, depending on their personal preference and comfort of a particular package, they've got some examples about how they can work with it. So I think one would never gain universal agreement on one software package. They will have their relative advantages and disadvantages, e.g. is it free or do you have to pay for the thing, ease of use, do you need to do any sort of programming, do you want some sort of point and click kind of interface, but if you're putting the same data in, running the same method, you're going to get the same output regardless. And I think there's a strong emphasis in this course, not so much about the software package itself, but what those numbers mean, how you interpret them objectively, and what would be fair conclusions or inferences to draw from the computer results.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of focusing on, like you said, that transferability and having those discussions with the authors and with the development group as well. So the course will also include blended learning materials to support facilitators and to use within in-person workshops. How would you say that the approach of the course and the blended learning could dovetail with or kind of complement initiatives that may already be in place at institutions?
I think this complementarity approach, and coming back to our sort of opening discussion on sort of statistical anxiety, and because for this subject area, clearly any learner who is considering taking this course is probably or has suffered from in the past some degree of statistical anxiety. So it's all about trying to complement, not to substitute any teaching tuition that they have received themselves, but to perhaps offer maybe a different perspective, different slant on how to approach a problem. And one hopes that if one is exposed to a wide range of ways of presentation, and blended learning environment very much facilitates that, it helps to have that sort of aha moment, the light bulb lights up, and then the learner really gets it, and then their self-confidence and has been boosted, and then they can go on and be independent data analysts.
So if we could end on a question, really I wanted to ask you what you're most looking forward to from the development group workshop and from the discussions that we'll have.
Well, I very much I like to treat this to some extent as a bit of a blank canvas, while some suggested topic areas have been put forward, which I feel personally, and I'm always biased in these matters, do provide a fairly logical progression of, sort of statistical techniques. Now, inevitably, no single course can cover everything, and so there always has to be a bit of discipline about deciding what really should go in versus what sadly has to perhaps come out to allow for something arguably more important to go in. So I put together a suggested sort of roadmap for the course about topic areas. I like to think of fairly natural sequencing to them, a natural progression to them, but I don't want anyone to feel these are particularly set in stone. I very much welcome input from others, and whether that's on your software packages, specific areas within a topic which prospective module author feels very passionately about and feels should feature. So for myself, this issue of those false positives, false negatives, reproducibility of results, statistical power, statistical significance versus practical significance. So by way of example, in that specific those sort of a couple of modules, those are the sorts of themes I would feel learners would really benefit from. And so I would welcome sort of equivalent input on other subject areas, as I see this very much as a collaborative effort. And indeed, I think the variation, I mean, every prospective module author, I mean, we're all different in terms of how we teach, our style, oral and sort of written as well. And so I think it's good that learners themselves will be exposed to some, let's say, heterogeneity in approach, as they sort of navigate from one subject area to another, as curated by different individuals. And I think this will also benefit them, such that as and when they read, see journal articles from many different sources and written by many different people, they themselves will be written in sort of different styles. And so when one is exposed to variation or sort of from a pedagogical perspective, I feel that also assists, perhaps more subliminally and perhaps less tangibly, but it does assist those the learners' understanding. So as and when we have these sort of development workshops, I feel anything goes, and everything is up for discussion, and it's about trying to hopefully reach as close to consensus as possible on the way forward, but where possible to have a fairly coherent path throughout the course. So I would not wish to see these as sort of silos and these sort of standalone bits. It'd be nice to see these sort of integrated as much as possible. Now that could mean, for example, having a particular data set or small set of data sets which could be used as sort of recurring examples, but then with different methods applied to them. So then you've got that nice sort of threading throughout the course to make things more joined up and more relatable. But I think it is an exciting project. Even now, it's hard to envisage exactly what the final course is going to look like. It will be a process of evolution, and I very much look forward to seeing how this does sort of evolve and hopefully blossom in the coming months.
Fantastic. Thank you, James. Yes, absolutely. The focus on collaboration, as you've said, the collaboration between authors, between yourself and the development group members as well, and our reviewers, and thinking about that kind of iterative development and yes, the kind of connections through the courses as well as the individual modules. So thank you so much for your time, James. I'm really looking forward to working further on the development of the course. But it's been fantastic to talk to you today.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.